This is the macro monitor for April 2019. This is our chart review that we do every month. Several things have happened since we talked to you last time, and we're going to bring Joe Calhoun in. But Joe, before we get started today, I got to tell you, some pretty exciting stuff going on here in Nashville. The NFL draft is going to be here in a week or so, and the Nashville Predators hockey team is in the playoffs. We're pretty psyched about that.
Well, congratulations, Bob, because down here in Miami, we got nothing to celebrate. Okay, we're watching this draft, this NFL draft coming up, and we're certain, absolutely certain, that the Dolphins are going to draft somebody that ends up being good for somebody else because they get them, they come down here and they don't do well, and then they trade them away, and then they go become all pros. So we don't really know how they are until we trade them.
Well, we're pretty excited to have a mediocre pro football team here, but.
We don't even listen. You know what? Mediocre is the problem. We would. I think I'd prefer it if we were awful because maybe we get a draft pick then. Mediocre thing doesn't work for me. Now, best thing going on in Miami sports ended last night. In fact, Dwayne Wade had his last home game for the Miami Heat last night. Best thing to happen to Miami sports in a long time. He was a hell of a player down here, and he played his last home game last night. So now we got nothing to cheer for.
Well, the dry spell continues.
It does.
Hey, let's talk markets. I wish I could say there was something truly exciting to talk about, but things are just kind of, going along at the moment. The economy is showing some signs of slowing, but nothing big. You did mention fracking in mining areas, so let's talk about some of that. Let's start with the slowing economy. What's going on?
Well, not exactly a shocker here. We've been talking about this for a good 6 to 9 months. Going back to last year, the economy, we got that burst of growth last year from the tax cuts and probably some from the spending too, because we got, kind of a fiscal impulse there from the Trump administration. But we kind of felt all along it wasn't going to last. It didn't really change things enough to get a lasting impact. I'm not saying that cutting corporate taxes wasn't good. It was. But when you went from an effective tax rate to an actual tax rate from 25 to 20, it just really doesn't have that much of an impact. And on the individual tax side, it seems like I think it ultimately was a tax cut. But, it was a distributional thing, too. So we've been talking to a lot of people about taxes lately. I just got a call from a lady in Wyoming who was kind of shocked at her tax bill because she couldn't write off her local property taxes. And she pays a lot of them, by the way, in Wyoming and Jackson, Wyoming. So she was kind of shocked by that. And I think there's a lot of people in states here coming up on April 15th are going, I got to do what? I got to write a check. So that's having a little bit of an impact. But look, all we're doing is slowing back the trend. The trend has been really since the beginning of this expansion back in 2009 has been around 2.5%, somewhere in that range. And we're just going back to that. That's all. I don't think it's anything more than that, at least not right now.
Well, let's talk about construction. That's one area where mostly public construction is where we've seen the positives. Individual housing and apartments, things like that, still, they're moving a little better than they were, but not a lot to really get thrilled about.
No, it's kind of interesting. We did see construction spending up the last couple of months, and that's a change. We had, construction spending had been trending down. And you're right, it's a lot of public stuff, highways, roads, schools, education, that kind of stuff, which is not surprising. I mean, we've talked about infrastructure spending in this country for a long time, and we talk about it like nothing's going on, but of course there's always things going on with infrastructure. It's mostly driven by local politics, and local budgets have been in pretty good shape, complete contrast to the national, federal level. Some of the states are not in great shape, Illinois and so forth, but in general, local government is in pretty good shape financially. So we've been seeing some spending on roads and highways and, like I said, schools. That's been good. You're right, the residential stuff hasn't been as good, but, it looks like it's stabilized too. We got a little bit of a slowdown. Interest rates came down. 10-year Treasury note came down from 3.25. We're trading around 2.5 now. So that brought mortgage rates down, and we saw a pretty good surge in mortgage refinancing and also in purchase financing. So we've seen a little bit of a stabilization, at least, a little rebound. And so, look, it's not subtracting, I guess is a good way to put it. So that's better than subtracting.
Well, I did talk to a mortgage broker today, and she said that because interest rates had dropped a little bit, their business has picked up. So, we'll see what that looks like next month.
Yeah, well, we're looking at making that move up to South Carolina pretty soon. So I've been checking out mortgages too. It looks like you can get a little under 4 right now for a 30-year fix. So it's not a bad number.
Yeah, get out of Miami. Come north to go south.
Yeah, I always tell people we're as far south as you can get in the United States, and I got to go north to get southern. And so we're doing the opposite of what most people are doing. Most people are leaving the north in states with taxes like New York, New Jersey, and places like that, and they're going to Florida where there's no state income tax. But I'm so tired of Miami and so fed up with Miami that I'm going the opposite direction. I'm going from a state with no income tax to one that has one, just because the quality of life is completely different. So,
yeah, just remember what we say here in the South. Bless your heart.
well, bless your heart. Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about some of the other positives. Industrial production was up a little bit. Utility output was up. Manufacturing, though, kind of down. But tie all of those together for us.
Well, look, this slowdown has really been about manufacturing, and consumption's pulled back some too. But consumption's one of those lagging things. Consumption's what happens after you do the stuff to make the economy grow. Consumption is the result of economic growth, not the cause of it. But so we've seen this slowdown in manufacturing, and it's pretty broad based, I suppose. But a lot of it has to do with this fracking too. It comes out in the industrial production numbers, factory orders, and so forth. All that feeds through the fracking stuff, feeds through those numbers. And obviously, oil prices have gone down in the 50s, and the companies are not fracking as many new wells. Now, oil prices are trending back up, so we'll see how that impacts things. I suspect, though, that you won't see as much of a rush back into to drilling more wells. I think there was a lot of wells that were drilled and shut in that they're going to just reactivate, essentially. I don't think they have to drill a lot of new wells. So I wouldn't expect to see a lot of, even if prices stay high, well, I suppose unless they went up to, $90, $100, I guess you might see something then, but I don't really see that coming. But it's, in the 60s, I think that, you're probably not going to see a lot of extra activity there. But again, that could be one of those things where it just stops getting worse. And I kind of think that's where we are. Oil prices, look, the last slowdown in 2015 and 16 was driven by a big fall off in fracking. And I think there was some fear as you got down in the 50s that people thought, oh my gosh, we're going to do this again. And when it had a little pullback, and now things seem to be stabilizing because oil prices have stabilized, and I think we're starting to see that. So inflection points are important, Bob, and that's what we're always kind of looking for. It's in economics, it's called what happens at the margin. What happens at the margin is what moves things. It's what changes things. It's the lever. So when things stop getting worse, that's an improvement in a sense. I think that's kind of where we are.
Well, and if my memory is not off too far, I mean, we popped in the last 30 days from about 56 a barrel up to 63 a barrel. I think that's where it was today.
Exactly. And that's, like I said, I wouldn't expect to see, like I said, it's not like they're going to run out and drill a bunch of wells because oil went up $10. But it stops them from pulling back, I guess is a good way to put it. So,
well, let's move on to personal income. I mean, the numbers here, personal income was up 0.2, but year over year still look pretty good, up 4.2. You got consumption up 0.1, which is a lagging indicator, but inventories are still going up. And then you have to tie in the savings rate with that because generally less consumption, more savings. So where do we stand as of today with those three pieces?
Well, it's really interesting. I think that, we've seen the savings rate go back up into the 7% range, and that's not a bad number. It's not as good as it used to be. Back when we were kids, typical was 10%. That was pretty typical all the time. Of course, things are a little bit different now. People have 401ks where they're saving different. Back then they had pensions. So the savings numbers really it's kind of hard to apples and oranges kind of between, time frames. But 7% is definitely higher. I don't know if it was 7 or 7.1, but it was in the sevens. Look, we had personal income has been running in this range, this 4.5% range, the entire expansion. It's not a great number. It's not a terrible number. It's just kind of in the middle. And it's not changing all that much. We've seen some increase in wages more recently, particularly with retail, because of increases in minimum wages and so forth. But income's been pretty steady. Income growth has been pretty steady. What fluctuates is the consumption side. And when it fluctuates, then you get the savings side fluctuating too. So what we've seen recently, and you mentioned inventories, I think it's, very important. We watch these inventory to sales ratios. But there are times when sales are really strong and you see inventories going up, it really doesn't matter because they're selling the stuff. So when we have a situation like now, it's pretty obvious that companies, whether retailers or whatever, I mean, look, I'm looking at total business inventory, so it's not just retail level, it's wholesale and retail. They obviously did not anticipate this slowdown in consumption because the inventory to sales ratio has gone up here. That's a worrisome sign. It's not something we want to see. And certainly if that continues, it will be a big problem because what will happen is that the companies that manufacture goods will pull back. They'll say, look, we've got too much inventory in the pipeline. We're going to pull back on production, and that will cause economic growth to fall. Inventory build in the short term looks positive for GDP because it is a positive in the GDP equation. But ultimately, you got to pay the piper. You either got to sell the stuff or you got to stop making more stuff. And so we'll see how that goes. I would also say, too, the savings rate. I hear people a lot of times saying, oh, my gosh, the savings rate went up. That's terrible for the economy. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It's terrible for consumption maybe, but it's really more of it's not that in a lot of cases, it's not so much that people are saving more. It's just that they're spending less and it accumulates. Sometimes there is a conscious decision to save more and spend less, and that's fine too. But listen, people need to understand this. Savings is important. When savings rate went to zero back in 2005, 2006, that's not a positive sign. You got to have savings to fund investment. Investment's how you get productivity gains. Productivity gains is how you get a rise in the standard of living. So if you want the standard of living to go up, you got to save. So the fact that it's at 7% is good news. May not be great for short-term GDP numbers, but that's not really what we're trying to accomplish here, I think, with the economy. We're trying to accomplish making our society better. And so we do that by getting more productive, and we get that from savings and investment. So it's a good thing.
Do you see us getting more productive? Because you said, population growth and investment are really kind of what push us forward. We don't have that much growth in the workforce, but can technology make us more productive?
Well, look, that's the theory, right? I mean, productivity is one of those really hard things to measure. You kind of measure it from residuals. You look at the amount of stuff being produced by the number of people working, number of hours being worked, and so forth. So it's a kind of a residual. But look, does technological advance create productivity? Well, I think it depends. I would argue that let's think about this. Do you think Facebook has made people more productive? Well, my first initial reaction is exactly what you're doing, is to chuckle and go, yeah, right. But then again, we don't know because think about it from a marketing standpoint. The advertising dollars being spent on Facebook, to the extent that they're effective, is a more efficient way to advertise and target advertising than we've ever seen before. So maybe in some sense it makes marketing more effective, more productive. Maybe it does make us more productive. Now, like I said, I would argue that it's people wasting time and arguing about things that don't need to be argued about, but that's me. I'm not a Facebook guy. Same thing with Twitter. I look at Twitter and it's like, really, why do I want to get onto Twitter and get in some argument with some guy I never met? I think it's a waste of time. But I don't know. We can't calculate how Twitter changes the productivity equation. We have to wait and see how that all plays out. In general, technological advance is a positive for society. It's positive for productivity. And the people out there, the Luddites who are saying, oh my gosh, we're going to have robots take all the jobs, have it wrong. Robots taking the jobs is exactly what we want because it will allow us and free us up to be more creative and do other things. That's what capitalism is all about, getting more productive. Look, the term Luddite, if you remember what this comes from, was in the 1800s when they had power looms. They came up with power looms. They didn't need weavers. They didn't need people like that. They didn't need people to operate the loom. So they gathered together. All these guys got together and started smashing the looms. They didn't want these things. Well, ultimately, I think we probably proved that the power loom was better than some guy, doing it by hand. He may have not liked it at the time, but ultimately, I think we came out better. Go back to the 1800s. 80% of this country, maybe 90% was involved in agriculture. Now it's a fraction. It's 1, 2%, whatever the number is. It wasn't a bad thing. And almost all of that was because of, you want to call it robotics, call it machinery, call it technology, call it whatever you want. But tractors were better than mules. I know that because I've tried to plow with a mule before, and it wasn't any fun because I'm an old guy. And I remember when my grandfather put me behind the mule, and that mule didn't want to go anywhere. And the tractor, all I had to do was press the gas, and it went. So, I've been there and done that. Like I said, technologically advancing is a good thing.
All right, CFNAI, down a little bit for the month. Any concerns there?
Well, we don't like to see negative numbers, but it's not exactly shocking. Like I said, we're pulling back to our long-term trend of about 2% growth. And I wrote, 2 or 3 episodes ago, we talked about it, how we'd probably overshoot to the downside, just like we overshot to the upside a little bit. Look, the economy doesn't know it's supposed to grow at 2%. Sometimes it's going to grow at 3, sometimes it's going to grow at 1. It may average out to 2, but you're not going to stay at 2 very long. It's like I hear people talk about the stock market. Well, the average return is 10% or 8%, whatever number they pick. Yeah, except it never does that. It does 15, it does 16, and it does 2 or minus 10, but it never does the number that the average is. Same thing with the economy. It's 2% growth is about where we need to be, and that's where we're going to get come hell or high water. CFNAI is negative, but it's not negative enough to be worried about recession. All it says is that in very recent times, we have grown slightly below trend. By the way, the period just prior to that, we grew slightly above trend. This is not exciting stuff here. We're just flopping around the middle there. It just doesn't really mean all that much.
Average only exists in a perfect world in a vacuum.
Well, there you go. And I don't have either one of those things.
Hey, let's talk durable goods for a minute. It was down mostly aircraft. Aircraft industry 757's kind of oops.
It was 737 Max.
37, yeah.
Boeing is not having a real good time right now. I saw a report yesterday that their orders last month were 0. I'm not exactly shocked by that, but look, Boeing will eventually figure out how to fix that thing. But right now they got a real problem, and it does impact the capital goods, the durable goods numbers. Aircraft and transportation is a big part of that. If you take that out, then it's just kind of flat. It's just really not a whole lot going on there. What we worry about, what we've talked about many times, is the core capital goods that comes out of that report. Just not a very good trend there. We're back up near the peak. That's fine, except the peak is this, 2019, the peak is almost exactly the same as it was 19 years ago in 2000. The economy is a lot bigger than it was in 2000. We ought to be investing more. And core capital goods at that level, to me, is just not that great. So we'll see what happens. Again, it's not anything that screams recession. It just says that things are not changing a whole lot, I guess is a good way to put it. So,
last thing today, let's talk about employment. Doing fairly well. Jobless claims haven't been this low, I think, since 1969. But things are a lot different now than they were in 1969. So I guess it's another one of those things. How do you read the numbers?
Well, I don't look. The monthly average has come down some. We had that 1 month. Last month was not a very good month. This month was a little bit better than expected. You average them out, and you come out with a number that's not so great. It's not terrible. We're still growing over 100,000 jobs a month. Look, here's something I learned a long time ago. When it comes to the employment report, first of all, here's a little tidbit most people don't know. That number they give you when they say 150,000 or whatever the number is, yeah, the plus minus on that is 100,000. So the accuracy on that number is not very good. So here's what I look for. When I get that report on Friday morning, once a month, that was the third Friday of the month, what I look for is the sign. Is it a plus or a minus? If it's minus, it's bad. And if it's plus, it's probably okay. So we're still in the plus column. Job openings jumped up to all-time highs. But I want to give a caveat there. After we did this report, we did get another JOLTS report where we had a big drop-off in those. We reversed almost the entire month. Look, the employment picture is not perfect. It's pretty darn good. A lot of people are working. But Challenger layoffs are running pretty high. Not up a whole bunch over just the same month last year, but the first quarter was up quite a bit compared to the first quarter last year. That's layoffs at big companies. That's what Challenger tracks. So that's not so great. The employment numbers, look, work week, we did add some jobs, and average hourly earnings were only up 0.1. But, average work week still only 34.4 hours. It's just not very good. It's just blah. And I think that's why we're growing at 2%. It just there's always a plus and a minus in these things, I guess is a good way to put it. There's pluses and minuses, and it comes out and it just seems kind of mediocre. But we've been doing that mediocre for a long time. We're 10 years into this recovery, expansion, whatever you want to call it, and I don't see it ending yet. So plodding along, it seems sometimes to be a little maybe not what everybody wants, but it's better than not. It's like birthdays. I'd rather have them than not. I'd rather have growth than not, even if it's only 2%. So, yeah, I'm going to keep having birthdays.
Well, hey, blah is much better than OMG. So I guess we're good to go.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Joe. You want me to save you a seat at the Preds game?
No, I'm good, man.
All right.
I'm not much of a hockey fan because the Panthers down here, we made the playoffs in '96 and not since. So we're just not big hockey fans down here.
All right. Well, bless your heart. Hey, if you'd like to see all of Joe's report, here's the web address. We'll be back with more on the chart review next month.